Right, friends. Well, it's 2 p.m. on a Wednesday, so you know what that means. It's Wealth Wednesday time. I am very excited to get started today, so we're going to give it a few minutes to see who can hop on here before we get it going. So thank you for those of you who are going to join us today. It's going to be a really great talk. I'm telling you, we have a very fantastic member of our community. Her name is Desiree. Desiree Gonzales is going to be joining us today to talk about how we can utilize yoga, Reiki, and those different types of methods of self care and healing to not only survive but thrive in this world. So I see that you're joining us now, Desiree. So thank you so much. Let me go ahead and bring you in. Let me see here. Give me just 1 second. And fine. It is connected. Hi, Desiree.
Hi!
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I'm super excited that you were able to join us.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. How cool is this? These are the types of things that get me going, I'm telling you. I reached out to you not that long ago with this idea of joining me on a quick chat. I started this thing called Wealth Wednesdays really on a whim. I believe it was the Tuesday, the day that I started it. And I said, I'm gonna go live with a good friend of mine. His name is Luis Perales, and him and I are just always talking about how much beauty and strength and power and value is in our own community,
Mhm.
and we need to make sure we're doing our part to make sure that gets exemplified, and as many platforms as we can do to create spaces for folks who are not only in entrepreneurship but also invested in the collective healing of our community, and that can look that can look and it can take so many different forms and shapes, and so him and I were talking about doing something live, and I said, you know what, I'm gonna do this weekly, and it's totally not my thing. It took me a long time to get comfortable with the idea of being, front facing in social media and all of that, but that was my work to do, and so I'm doing it now, and I'm hoping that it brings just a little bit of value to people, you know what I mean?
Yeah, good for you for hearing the call and stepping into it. Even like feeling the fear and doing it anyway. That's
Yeah, that's what it is, and my partner Stephanie was like, you need to reach out to Desiree, and I looked you up, and I was like, yes, of course I do. This is perfect. This is exactly why Wealth Wednesday was started, because to me, wealth isn't necessarily simply about money. It's not about finances. I mean, that's a part of it, of course, but the way I like to think about wealth is this idea of a spoke or a wheel with different components. And the only way that that wheel is going to be able to move forward is if we start to think about creating generational wealth beyond the idea of money and financial sustainability. That's definitely one component, but we also need to make sure we're taking care of ourselves mentally, physically, emotionally, that we get to invest in our intellectual wealth, so that we can start to create that better future for our family, for our community, and that we can achieve a true and authentic level of being wealthy. A wealthy individual is this whole idea of health as wealth.
absolutely.
So, with that said, we have a few people that are joining us, and I'm really excited about today's talk, Desiree. I had a really great idea of like where I wanted this conversation to go, and then you posted something on your Instagram that just threw me completely off. So I want to start there, okay, if you don't mind. So
Uh-oh. Okay.
you posted something that just got me right, and not a lot of things like get me shook, but this one got me shook. You posted something about breakfast pizza.
Oh my God.
And I want to know about that because I love breakfast and I love pizza. So
Right.
please tell me how that came about.
So I actually didn't make it. This is all I have to give credit to my partner. My partner was like, you know what? Pizza sounds so good and we haven't had breakfast. So why not? So I do it. I was like, do your thing. I'm going to be grounding, getting ready for this call.
Yes.
So I got to stuff my face right before this call with that amazing breakfast pizza. And I love that. Like cooking can be an intuitive experience. For me, I'm the type, like, I'm an intuitive, but it has not translated into the kitchen for me.
Okay.
And so I love when I can see people who can just like get some flavors together and see what's in the fridge and just whip up something amazing. And so
Yeah.
that's my partner. I
It looked delicious. It looked delicious, and I'm all about it. You're absolutely right. There's magic that can happen in the kitchen.
yeah,
And I'm gonna have to give that a shot. We'll see how it goes.
try it. I mean, it everything and bacon. Oh,
We're good. Are you good? I didn't lose you there?
no, you're good.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I went off on a tangent there, but I'm telling you, it caught me off guard, and I was like, we gotta talk about that because
Definitely
that looks pretty amazing.
tag me in your pizza.
Okay, I will. Well, let's back up a little bit, Desiree. Tell us a little bit about who you are, and how you got started doing what you're doing, and what are the services that you offer?
Okay. Yeah. So my name is Desiree Gonzales, and I am a yoga instructor, an intuitive healer, most recently a minister, an ordained minister, and yeah, and an activist, I guess. Change maker is really what I like to say. And I'm a Tucson native. I don't know if I just said that, but born and raised here, Afro Latina. And some of the services that I offer, I teach yoga classes. I do a lot of workshops and circles. Particularly, my offerings really center around BIPOC, and really just anything to hold space for folks to come back to themselves.
Right.
And I believe that liberation is found in being connected with your breath and your body and being in community where you feel safe and brave in. So that is what I do. And I also do one-on-one sessions with clients. And so intuitive healing, it's really hard to explain, but essentially it's my spirit team and your spirit team coming together to hold space for whatever needs to happen. And so I keep it flexible. I don't really like to define it at this time, but it does include intuitive healing, Reiki, sometimes oracle cards, movement, embodiment, breath work, sometimes yoga, and storytelling. I work with my clients a lot on rewriting narratives from the past. And really finding where our power is, like so many things we're not in control of, right? We're not in control of anything that's outside of this body. So many things happen in a day and in a lifetime. But what we are responsible for is our perception, the stories that we tell about our experiences, and our reactions to that. And so I find it very healing to tap into where your power is in any given situation. And
That's
change and liberation happens, in my opinion.
absolutely. Desiree, I want to ask you a question if you don't mind. You said something really important that stood out to me. You talked about rewriting our stories, right? And for a long time, me personally, I felt like my story was embedded almost in my DNA, right? Because we pick up not only like habits, but we pick up our like generational trauma as well from our environment and our families and what we've seen and what we've collectively experienced, right? And so that generational trauma kind of follows you, right? And so would you say that through storytelling and that collective healing and that building of self-awareness, is that a path towards finding that collective healing?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of us, I'm speaking on like my generation and maybe the generation right behind me. We are the change makers. We're the generational curse breakers.
Okay.
That's a lot of my client age range is around that age. And so not only do we have that, generational trauma that lives within us, but we have to remember that even though we have that, we also have the generational wisdom,
Right.
and everything that we need to heal ourselves is within us, within our
Right.
body. So even though I'm an intuitive healer, I'm not actually healing anyone other than myself. Like my medicine is for me, but
Right.
just like I'm a space holder for folks to tap into their own, medicine within. That pain can turn to medicine. Um, and so, yeah, so we may have the trauma that lives within us, but the trauma is our initiation.
Hmm.
Anything that's ever happened to our ancestors or to us in our lifetime is really an initiation to crack us open for deeper healing. we allow it, right? Like, should we choose to walk down that path, like it can become medicine.
Right.
We just have to let it, we have to sit with it long enough and let it move through us long enough. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and so that I look at, honestly, I look at my one-on-one sessions in particular. I'm sort of, this is the visualization that I told a friend. So the pain and the trauma of our experience can sit really deep within us. And
Uh-huh.
look at the energetic body, like it sits at the core, maybe like our root chakra or like the center of our bellies, like that fight or flight response, like that's where we hold a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
so in my sessions, I feel like I'm kind of like grabbing the person's hand, right? Like we're kind of going in together, like deep within to the center. And I'm just kind of narrating, like, this is what I see. You know, I kind of picture it as like soil, and there's, you know, you have this garden of your experience, and maybe there's some weeds there, there's some thorns, you know, there's also some flowers, there's some seeds. So we just kind of do like spiritual gardening almost, and I'm kind of guiding them, and I say, this is what I see here. And, you know, we have free will. Like, what do you want to do
Right.
today? Do you want to put some seeds? Do you want to pull some weeds? And so, like, with consent, you know, we just kind of explore. And so, yeah, I digress. Where were we? Going
Oh,
into
that's beautiful. I see a message here saying, I love this imagery, and I couldn't agree more, Desiree. Thank you so much for painting that picture for us. And it makes a lot of sense because I think if I'm understanding correctly, what you're doing is you're facilitating that journey because it's not easy, you know, and sometimes we at least personally for myself in my own journey, we don't realize that it's not something that you can do by yourself, nor should you, right? Because there's people like you.
Right. And I just remembered that the other visualization of what I see in my sessions is also just like a hand on the spine. Like, you know, like all we need is like the 20 seconds of bravery to like sit with a feeling, and then it passes, right? Like it
Right, right.
passes. So like it's also, I agree, like we don't need to do it alone.
Hmm.
It's kind of like just like somebody placing their hand on someone's spine when they're telling the
Right,
truth, you
right,
know? It's
right.
just that little holding of space, like you got this. And yeah, that's
I'm super grateful for you, Desiree. I'm super grateful for your words. I'm super grateful for the work that you're doing. I think it's very critical. I think it's vital to, like we said, the collective healing of people of color in our communities. Unfortunately, there's not enough energy being, you know, provided and given towards that healing work. I've learned a lot of that, you know, from Stephanie, from my partner, and I really appreciate you doing that and taking that responsibility on. I'm sure for you it must be humbling to be able to be part of somebody's healing journey. And I'm curious to find out how you got started. You know, was it an idea? Was it a calling? Can you walk us through that a little bit?
yeah. It's really hard to trace back when it started for me, and I mean, I guess I can start with my own trauma. When we're talking about trauma as initiation to our gifts and to our medicine, I was somebody who experienced trauma from a very young age. I mean, really, like the age range of like infant to 5 years old was when I first experienced trauma. And I think that just because of like my childhood and the environment that I grew up in, I really did have to grow up fast. I was very emotionally mature for my age. Um, and that was largely due to trauma. And I think naturally I was just like an intuitive child. And I feel like often like our pain leads to our gifts, right? So
Right.
whatever we do most naturally that doesn't feel like work, the ways that we show up in ways that are natural to us, it really points to the direction of what we should be doing for a living. And
Hmm.
I just knew from a young age. And something like, and I just had this breakthrough like a few weeks ago, um, this idea of like showing up and being emotionally supportive for others was actually like a survival mechanism for me in my home environment growing up. So that's actually the way that I used to. So it's interesting because we have these like coping mechanisms, and then we can
Hmm.
replace them with like healthy coping skills. And
Ah,
so my unhealthy coping mechanisms that I'm really grateful for because it got me to survive
Uh-huh.
in adulthood was providing like this emotional stability or emotional support for adults in my life, particularly my parents.
Uh-huh.
And that's how I would cultivate safety within my body. So I knew that if I could be emotionally there and hold space for my parents, then that would regulate my environment to feel safe. And
Got it.
so it's really cool to look back and go, man, even when I was like any time in my life when I was acting out or maybe not at my best or um, unhealthy or in addiction, all my, we're always doing what we know to do to survive.
Right. Survival. Mm-hmm.
Survival, right? And like
Mm-hmm.
how brilliant we are that
Right.
know to reach for something to
Right.
get through the moment. And so
Mm-hmm.
maybe we do that for years and then maybe we step into awareness and then we can replace those with different things. But so it originally started out like this is how I'm surviving in my home life, right?
Right.
And then now it's moving to, oh, it's my gift. It's something that I can do naturally. Like I can walk into a room and be highly sensitive and just attuned to other people's energy. And I can, I love playing around with energy, right? And just like, oh, I can hold space and I can settle and I can pick up on things. And so now
Mm-hmm.
it was like this phase, okay, let me step into this as work and then
Uh-huh.
feel worthy of being paid for it. Like,
Uh-huh.
so then that's been a whole journey. Um,
Yes, absolutely.
yeah, but I think it started in childhood, as it does
Mm-hmm.
for both of us, you know?
Right. Right. That's a great story. And somehow I knew you were gonna tap into that, because that this isn't something that you just realize, "Oh, yeah, I kind of want to do that. That sounds kind of fun. I'm gonna figure that out."
Right.
I'm glad that my intuition was somewhat accurate there. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
Um, and I think in our journeys we're never alone, where we meet the people that we're supposed to meet for a very specific reason. Everybody has a purpose in our life, and so I'm wondering if you ever met somebody who helped to maybe establish you or ground you or maybe just solidify this journey for you. And yeah, I think it's important for us to acknowledge those folks.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Ah.
And so, of course, yes, I think along my life, I have found the right teachers at the right time. And it's hard to, I mean, there's so many people that have shown up for me. I think the thing that all these folks have in common, um, were people who really like saw a spark and provided a platform.
Ah.
I think that's the most powerful thing you can do as a teacher is somebody like if you can we're all teachers, right? And if we can see someone and see the spark that maybe even they don't see at that time and provide like little breadcrumbs of opportunity for them to step into. And I'm saying this also like as a woman of color, as a Black woman, a lot of times like what gets us over that bridge is somebody extending a hand, providing a platform like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
this live,
Right.
uh, an opportunity for us to step into that work.
Right.
Uh, and so, that's, I've gotten here because of opportunities, because of people's support. And so the way that I can give that back is by doing the same. It's this
Mm-hmm.
continuous cycle. I'm also one of those people, and I know that I've listened to some interviews of other people saying this, but like, and they were like, oh, but really my future self is like who motivates me. Like my great
Mm.
teacher is like this version of my highest self that's like always pulling me along the path. I've always been really connected to my inner child and then my inner parent or my higher self. And it kind of
Uh-huh.
just, but I'm always like, I have these two like energies pushing and pulling, and then I'm in the center. And
Uh-huh.
I'm always like inspired by this future version of myself. And I think like that higher self has been the energy that's like kept me alive, that's kept me going, that's kept me trying.
Right.
So I don't, even my teachers, I have to like work to just humanize even my teachers.
Mm-hmm.
I never want to put anybody on a pedestal. We're all like humans helping each other, but
Right.
there is like this like higher self that like this person that I see in my mind's eye that I am, and I'm just like always like taking steps in her direction. And so, you know, when people
That's
are like, I
wonderful.
inspire myself, I'm like, you know, but really, like, I'm the same way. You
Yes, yes. I've never really uh been privileged enough to hear those words that you just shared with such clarity, and I really appreciate that. And it speaks to the importance of staying grounded and authentic to yourself, because oftentimes we confuse like being inspired by others, and there's a fine line between finding inspiration and wanting to mimic or be like something else, and we don't take enough time to really investigate deep within ourselves to see if that's truly who we are, right?
totally.
But the way that you're describing it for me, like, it makes perfect sense. it's
Mm,
it's 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 aspiring to be that next version and best version of yourself that
absolutely.
keeps you grounded. That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Often what we admire in others is like usually like this untapped spark in ourselves.
Uh-huh.
And so we have it, like we have it within us all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just tapping into it.
So, Desiree, for me, who I'm not well versed in yoga or Reiki. I just very recently started incorporating into my morning routine guided meditation and incorporating breath work into that, and it has been life changing. And I knew that, I'm being a Mexican man. I'm what we call terco. We are just stuck in our ways, and we don't
Yep.
like to try new things. But I was brave and I wanted to try something new, and it was life changing. It was life changing. So I'm hoping you can share a little bit about what is yoga and and Reiki, like what does that do to the body? What does that do to your mental health?
Yeah. Well, this is our vessel. This is our home. This is our tool. Like we were born in this body, right? We're going to leave in this body. Like this is the one thing that's, well, I was going to say that's not unchanging. I mean, it's always changing, but it's always with us.
Right,
You know, like situations change, people come and go, tragedy strikes, but we have access to our breath. As long as we're alive, we have access to our breath in our body. And
right.
so to me, it's all about just fine tuning this instrument to make life easier. Um, and so, yeah, so everybody has, and it's accessible. That's also what it's accessible. It's
Mm-hmm.
universal to connect.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I think about like accessible, inclusive practices, we all have breath.
Right.
So it's super powerful to connect with that. And so that's what drew me to yoga. I was, as a child, I did gymnastics for, oh, I don't know, like 6 or 7 years. And then I got to high school and they didn't have a gymnastics team and I wanted to still move my body. And then I was led into yoga, like almost accidentally. I was in my living room practicing on a Rodney Yee DVD, like so old school, but I would do it on the weekends or like before school sometimes, and I just loved it. And I've always been an anxious person, and so I noticed the immediate difference. Like when I move my
Uh-huh.
body, I become settled. When I connect
Mm-hmm.
with my breath, I become more
Right.
settled. I first learned about breathing when I was a kid, and I used to get this like it happened like pretty often in childhood. I used to get this really bad, almost like an asthmatic cough, like yeah, I just it was really bad. And I remember sitting in the I almost would like when I got this cough because then my nana would sit with me in the bathroom and she would run the shower and then the bathroom would get really steamy and she'd just sit with me and I would have to breathe. And like everything would stop.
Mm.
And I think that's like one of my first moments like connecting to like, okay, if I regulate my breath, like things start to feel better. Um yeah, I'm just having this memory, this like really sweet memory of my nana holding me in the bathroom.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
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 And so but it's like, so and some people think, I can't do yoga because I'm not flexible, or we tell ourselves all these kinds of things. But there's so many different types of yoga. There's restorative yoga, there's power yoga, there's hot yoga, and there's yoga for everybody. And
Sure.
so it's really nice. Oftentimes, if people tell me like, "Oh, I don't practice yoga because of XYZ," I'm like, "Oh, you just haven't found the right practice yet." Because everybody can move. I mean, even just like you know, a forward fold, or just like, you know, moving your arms can be yoga. Like any kind of movement can be yoga when you're linking movement with breath. Yoga means to yoke the mind, the body, the breath together, you know? So anybody can practice it. And I think I'm like determined to get everybody I know to try it at least once or
I
have like
love it.
a positive experience with it.
I love that, Go. I think that's really important. Our friend Melissa from Mellow Macro says, Reiki me up, and she's wondering if she used that term correctly.
Yeah. Yes, you as the verb, raking me up. Yeah, it's a form of energetic body work, and it's an ancient practice. It's a sacred practice. You do need to be attuned to, you know, practice it on yourself and others.
Mhm.
But it's just one form of many, and it's connecting to life force energy. And
Okay.
so you bring in life force energy to move any blocks, any negative energy out, and it's a form of clearing. But what's interesting is like the more that I work with my clients one-on-one in my practice, I mean,
Uh-huh.
everybody's intuitive, you
Mm.
know, and it's so interesting because I almost feel like everybody has their own unique form of energy work.
Uh-huh.
And so Reiki is one of many, you know.
Mm.
Yeah, there's so many different ways to connect with life force energy, and that's just one route. But yeah,
Speak,
Reiki up.
speaking of which, Desiree, what are some of the most common misconceptions that you hear about? I know you mentioned that some people think they can't do it because it's maybe physically challenging, or maybe it's not accessible to them, and you've already broken down those misconceptions. So, what are some of the other misconceptions or misbeliefs, if you will, that you hear about yoga and Reiki?
Yeah, I'll tell you one of mine. I mean, I was very hesitant to step into yoga teaching. For me, as a Black woman, I thought it was only for white women or
Right,
white people to be a yoga instructor. I had never met a teacher, yoga instructor of color before.
right.
So when I stepped in, that was one thing. I think that a lot of like spiritual practices have been co-opted. A lot of just in the health and wellness or wealth and wellness world.
I like that.
Often it can be stolen, and oftentimes, like especially for people of color, like we feel like these practices aren't ours.
Right.
Remember, like our ancestors have been doing this for all of time.
Uh-huh.
I even try to like, even just in the form of like sitting in circles, sometimes I overthink my offerings and I'm like, oh, I need to have all this stuff planned. And then I have to remember, wait a minute, all I have to do is attune to my ancestors. And we've been sitting in circle telling stories for centuries,
Right.
right?
Right.
So, it, so that's one misconception is like, oh, it's not. And, oh, sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
It's, and I think that's what society, what like that's the function of white supremacy, is like to edge us out of our own experiences, of our space, of things that are our birthright.
Yes.
And so yeah, whenever I have a misconception about something that makes me feel good, or do I have to like automatically decolonize in that moment and say, wait a minute, who's benefiting from me not doing this, right?
I love that. I love
um
that you said that, because without that awareness, we're allowing the system to play itself and to be at work the way that it's supposed to function. Melissa says that she needs to realign her chakra, so she would like to book a Reiki session. So hang on just a little bit longer. We'll get to that here very soon. Um, so
awesome.
so with Reiki, right? So, because I think yoga is a little bit more commonly known. I think it's a little more mainstream, but Reiki, I think, goes a little bit more in depth. Um, so, what are some of the misconceptions or misbeliefs about Reiki?
hmm I haven't really heard. I mean, maybe just in general, I think in general, just like resistance towards energetic body work or towards spiritual practices, maybe just that it's like scary, or it's woo woo, or it's the opposite of maybe like Christian. Uh,
Okay,
maybe I've heard some of that. But to me, it's so practical. It's so
right,
second. Like I cannot fathom. I can't live a life where I just have this skin, bones, and muscles, and that's it.
right.
I I just am not that type of person, but I also am I just am so open-minded that I also don't feel like we can connect to God in only one way.
Mm,
Um, so, I mean, even in the yoga teacher training that I went to, it's like we have our physical body and then we have our energetic body. You know,
right.
if this is when people say energy doesn't like exist or you can't do energy work, I just say, do this.
Mm-hmm.
Like rub your hands together
Right.
vigorously for maybe a minute, and
Uh-huh.
then when you go like this, you can like feel your energy field.
Right.
I have to do it a while, you know, like you build up the heat and then you can start to feel this sense.
Uh-huh.
It's like, okay, you
Yeah.
know, like, or I'll just like, if somebody closes their eyes, you know, if I like, okay, tell me when you feel me coming towards you.
Mm-hmm.
Or have you ever been in a good mood and then you're around somebody who's in a bad mood and then you pick up on it? Like that's energy.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes,
energy doesn't lie. I think a misconception is like, oh, this doesn't exist, or you know, it's not real. But that's just fear, in my
it's
opinion.
not tangible. Right. That's so beautiful that you mentioned that, Desiree, because and I wasn't thinking about talking about this, but I just recently saw a video this morning actually about how water itself will
Mhm.
change its form
Yeah,
by the energy that you put into it. And they had this video of this microscopic like droplets of water, and it looks vastly different when you put good intentions into water as and you know or when you put negative intention into water, it changes its life format right in front of your eyes.
absolutely.
And to me, I was like, wow, that, I mean, if folks don't think energy is real or your intentions within your energy have an impact, an outward impact, we need to wake up to a different reality here very quickly.
Absolutely. And we're made up of mostly water, right? So
Yep.
when you look at that, how it changes in a glass of water, think of what like everything around you is doing to your internal system.
Yes.
So see, it's backed by science.
But it takes a scientist to tell us that it's
Right,
real.
right, right. But I
All
love,
right.
you know.
Yes. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure we talked about, Desiree, is this whole idea of the intersection between spiritual and collective liberation, specifically in communities of color, right? And so we talk about there are conditions, you know, there's a system at play that ensures that people remain in not the best conditions, right? Because of power structures and systematic racism exists, and all of that is intended to play out in a certain way that is not intended to benefit people of color, right? And
Absolutely.
I believe that the work that you're doing is absolutely countering that and will eventually lead us to finding that collective healing and liberation. But I was hoping you could talk to us a little bit about, in your experience, what has that looked like, and what are some of your personal goals in the role that you want to play in that?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. Well, it wasn't until a couple years ago that I realized that we need both.
Mhm.
We need both spirituality and activism for liberation. And I believe that liberation starts personal and then moves outward towards global liberation.
Right.
Uh, and so I remember being a very spiritually inclined child, you know, a young adult, and then getting really fired up and going through some phases of, you know, where I felt like I had to push that to the wayside and be full on in my activism. Um, because what we hear and what pushed me away from like spirituality, and I didn't want to put the two together with activism, is
Mm,
there's a lot of there's so much white supremacy and co-opting is so weaved into the spiritual practice, right? Like it's if you look at health and wellness and meditation and yoga, it's a very white space.
right.
It's um, marketed as such.
Absolutely.
And so what you see in a lot of those spaces, particularly I'm speaking for Tucson, Arizona, which is like a predominantly white city, is you see a lot of spiritual bypassing. You see a lot of like, we are one, all lives matter, you know, we're all the same. And, you know, yes, and right, like on a spiritual level, we are all one.
Sure.
But we are also living in a time and on a planet where there are systems in place that don't make it so,
Right.
right? Because
Right.
of history. And so
100%.
there's also like a need for resistance.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I feel like both are needed, and so we can't like burn ourselves up with anger, um, and we certainly cannot live in the scarcity mentality or the victim mentality, and
Mm-hmm.
that's where spirituality comes in as self-preservation. Like I need to be able to come back to my breath, to my body, and believe in a power higher than myself
Right.
to really survive and thrive.
Right.
And when I'm connected to body and breath, that's when I'm in my power. That's when I'm thinking clearly. That's when I have the lens of love and not the lens of fear. And I
Mm-hmm.
do say, show up in ways that are going to be of benefit to myself first and to everyone around me. And that's just that, right?
Right. Yeah,
I,
absolutely.
yeah.
I'm
And
re-
I, oh, go
Go
ahead.
ahead. No, I wanted to add because you reminded me of a lesson that I once received about, you know, the greatest warriors are the ones that are well equipped, right? And when I think about that, I think of a spear and a shield, right? And the spear you take with you when you're ready to engage in battle, but you also need a shield that's going to protect you from when somebody is throwing stuff at you, whether it's blows, physical, mental, spiritual, right? And that shield, I believe, is strengthened by your spirituality.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I can I use that?
Absolutely.
All credit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love the spear and the shield. Absolutely.
Hmm.
That's such a great visual for me. And that's what I'm doing, you know, like all of my offerings are centered around this like toolbox,
Hmm.
like cultivating this spiritual self-care, self-preservation toolbox to get you to have a sustainable existence on this planet while
Right.
you're um
Absolutely.
thing works every time, right? Like I also struggle with mental health issues. And so I know that when I'm on the brink of a panic attack, like several different things have worked to bring me back down and into my body.
Hmm.
Not just having one tool. It's not always going to be meditation.
Right.
Often meditation is like you're practicing that when you're good. So that
Hmm.
created a pathway so when you're in panic mode, you naturally return to breath. So a lot of this stuff is like preventative measures to
Right.
have so that you have what you need within you when you're faced with the trauma, the crisis of the moment. So I really love that. You
That
need your
makes
box, your spear, and your shield.
and your shield. Yep. That's how you're gonna not only survive, but you're gonna thrive.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Desiree, thank you so much. I 100% feel really grateful that you and I got to chat today. I hope we can do it again sometime. I know that we have some people in the live with us that want to know how to get a hold of you.
Yeah.
And obviously, I'm going to repost our conversation. And so I'm hoping that some people will take advantage of an opportunity to regain those tools that we already have within us, but somebody needs to help us sharpen those tools so that we can thrive in this society. So how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I wanted to say right now, as we're in this COVID-19 um, phase,
Uh-huh.
all of my offerings are donation based. So I just want to make sure that everybody who sees this knows that they can reach out to me and we'll always work out a plan of, you know, it's all donation based, pay what you can. But yeah, so I have circles, workshops, a yoga retreat coming up, and then also one-on-one sessions and yoga classes. So you can find me on Instagram at Desiree Gonzales _, and then my website is DesireeGonzales.me. And you can book a session by really, I'm working on getting a scheduling tool. So you can still at this point DM me or email me. There's a contact form on my website. And yeah, I'm pretty accessible. You can get a hold of me in many ways. But yeah, email or DM is fine for now. So I would
That's
love
wonderful.
whoever is feeling called to.
That's great. And I'm hoping that we as a community can start taking steps towards that collective liberation that we're speaking to. Um, any last messages that you want to leave us with, Desiree?
Yes, I did want to make sure that I spoke a little bit about existence is resistance. So I heard this the other day, and I'm speaking to Black folks and POC, it's very important, especially for Black folks, to understand that like these are really heavy times. These are trying times right now, and it has been, and it is. It's really heavy, and you don't have to do anything, right? You don't have to be an activist. You don't have to do anything but breathe, and everything that is optional. Just getting out of bed every day is a success, and that's an act of resistance. And how we choose to show up after that is up to us. And so I just want to make sure that everybody on this call is giving themselves grace and time to figure out what that is, and that it can change depending on the day. And that, other non-Black POC or white passing POC or white folks, that they're really conducting the necessary inventory of the ways in which they're upholding white supremacy in their lives in small and large ways, and that they're using privilege and their platform to really facilitate change, because it's not on the backs of POC or Black folks to really be at the forefront of this movement. And so, I just wanted to say that I'm sending love to everyone who's feeling that heaviness. Yeah.
Absolutely.
We do.
I appreciate that.
Brilliant. That generational resilience that lives within us. May we tap into that.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for sending us off with that wonderful message. I really appreciate that. Thank you again for taking the time out of your day to join us. I'm hoping that we can do this again sometime, Desiree, and continue to create a platform or a space for these types of conversations to take place.
Thank you for following the call, the opportunity, and the platform. I really appreciate it, and I can't wait till we speak again. So thank you.
We'll make sure it happens. Thank you, Desiree, and thank you everyone who joined us again. Reach out anytime to Desiree's Instagram. Desiree, can you tell us your website one more time?
Yes, it's DesireeGonzales.me.
There you go. There you have it, folks. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye, Desiree.